we're going to be talking with Liesl Ulrich-Verderber. And we're going to be talking about finding more beauty in life and finding more of the incredible things that are happening around us every single day. They just might be being drowned out by some of the other noise that we might hear in the news, in the media. And Liesl's going to talk to us about a lot of things, including her Conspiracy of Goodness network. And I'm really excited for you to meet her. And here she is. And for those who don't know Liesl, Liesl is the CEO of Ever Widening Circles, which is a global positive media company with 6 platforms created with the goal of proving that it is still an amazing world. By the age of 27, Liesl was also the founder of the Conspiracy of Goodness Network, a personal and professional growth platform where people who value and work in goodness can connect, collaborate, and change the world together. That is amazing. Her intention is simple: to celebrate the quiet wave of goodness and progress going on all around us that almost nobody knows about, and open a new era for us all by changing the negative dialogue of our times. She was raised in the Green Mountains of Vermont and brought her rural sensibilities to a Harvard education, a combination that is kicking the doors open on possibility. With a laser focus on using her background in design, economics, and education to make the world a better place, she has developed a personal mantra around what she gives her attention to. Is it novel? Is it useful? And how does it help? Which we will be talking about. And carrying both Irish and U.S. passports, she brings a global perspective to her work, having spent most of her life traveling to off the beaten path locations around the world. As a global citizen, Liesl is uniquely positioned to dig in and answer some of the most important questions of our time. And she's here today to enlighten us. Liesl, it is a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Brandon, thank you so much for having me and for that intro. And I'm just so excited to talk with you.
That's awesome. Let me tell you. So I sent a survey to my audience out a few months ago, and I asked them, what do you want to see on the show and in my content and all those things? And a couple people actually wrote that they want to hear about more good news going on in the world. So we started to incorporate like a good news segment at the beginning of each one of the broadcasts, which I haven't done much anymore because let me tell you, it was hard to find good news. Like I would search good news that happened today, and there would be like a few things out there, and I would use them all up because we used to do this show 3 times a week. And I've heard you and your mom talk about in the past with Ever Widening Circles how news is news because it's just that, right? It's rare. Mm-hmm. It's an uncommon event that's happening. And you've mentioned that the reason we don't hear a lot of good news out there is because a lot of the great things that are happening are slowly progressing and getting better and better. So my question for you is, what are some of the things in the world right now that you're really excited about? What are some of the really awesome things that are making progress in the world today?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great observation. And I'm glad you pulled down, because that's one of my favorite things to talk about really is this idea that, and I've heard Nicholas Kristof, who's a very famous New York Times writer. I've heard Steven Pinker, who's a great thinker on progress in the world, talk about these things. But this idea that like news is news because it's doesn't actually happen all that often. And things like child mortality rates going down, things like more people having access to sanitation and water, things like people getting more access to vaccines, and things like malaria and other mosquito transmitted diseases are all headed on a downward. They're going down, but they happen with little incremental progress, with small changes every day. They're not big, they're not sexy. That's why they're not making it onto the news. And so when I think about some of the things that I love to talk about that I've seen in the world that really are proving A, it's still an amazing world, and B, progress is happening, but it is just slower than the news likes to talk about. One of my favorite things to talk about is this great thought leader we wrote an article way back on named Topher White. And he does this thing called the Rainforest Connection. He started out as an engineer, and he went to Borneo. He found that basically one of the reasons why people couldn't stop poaching, especially poaching of wood and deforestation, was because you can't hear in the rainforest. It's not that like these people aren't patrolling. It's not like anything. You can have 100 meters away a chainsaw light up, but the rainforest is so full of sounds you can't hear a chainsaw and all that noise. So he said, well, why don't I create basically a microphone device using an old cell phone? So using a resource we already have, use that and have it listen, create an app basically that just listens for the chainsaw noises. It can drown out all the birds, all the everything that's around it. And just hear that. And then they would ping. Turns out there's like enough cell service, especially on the edges of these big game reserves, or these big rainforest reserves, that have enough cell service that you can ping the local guards, the local rangers, and they can go stop this rainforest deforestation before it even happens, just with the sound of a chainsaw going off. So this guy is like majorly solving like deforestation at its core, engaging the local community, giving them technology, using technology. Probably we have 10 old cell phones sitting in our various drawers, and he's doing this all just around the globe. Like that, it is absolutely incredible to me. And wait, get this is even more incredible. Now they've listened so much to the rainforest that now they can hear when the bird song changes to understand when poachers are coming in. So they're using AI to listen to all these noises. And so now before the chainsaw noise goes off, when the birds start making these sort of alarm noises, they can deploy people before the chainsaw has even started, before a single tree has a single mark in it, as the trucks are coming. It's bonkers. And now he's using that technology to help do whale science off the coast of Ireland. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's happening in this world that is just so incredible, that is making incremental change, that is really making a difference. So you think back to a couple of years ago when, remember, we were learning about how the rainforest is on fire. It was like, that was all we heard. The rainforest is on fire, the rainforest. Did we ever hear about anybody like Topher White in all of that?
No.
So the big thing is, when we look at all of the bad news that's happening in the world, we have to start asking ourselves, wait, there's got to be somebody solving this. And there usually is. And we really see our place within the media sphere as creating media that matters, positive media that matters, not like boy rescues puppy or whatever. I mean, I have a rescue dog. I love puppies, but like, that's not going to let me know that the big problems of the world are being changed. And so we like to do is we call it solutions-based media, right? So like, we're going to tell you, hey, we're not saying the rainforest isn't going away and it's not on fire, but what we're telling you is that there's somebody who's fixing that problem. And if we're going to support him and make sure that his project keeps going and that people put eyeballs on him, we have to talk about it. People have to know about him, or else all these amazing people that are doing stuff in obscurity won't be successful. Again, I'm going back to forest fires. There's another group that's using goats in Australia to help reduce forest fires, and now they're working out in California. Same group was working out in California. I mean, there are people solving these problems that we're just not hearing about. So that's one of my favorite to talk about, because it involves technology, it involves things that we have in our own house. And I was one of those kids that grew up in the Save the Rainforest era of ecology. So that's one of my favorite ones to sort of yell about from the rooftops.
I love that's so cool to hear. And for the longest time, like I was mentioning, I would look up like good news and you would hear like, puppy and cat saying from the tree, like you would hear those things, but you would never hear those huge problems being talked about and dissected and really worked on. And something I talk about a lot, and the one thing I was really impressed with you and what your mom are doing at Ever Winding Circles is, by the way, how long has Ever Winding Circles been around now?
So she started in 2014, and I was in college at the time, being a very cynical Harvard student who really did not believe the world was a great place, because I knew so, saying that very sarcastically. And then I came on to join her when I graduated in 2015. So in 2014 is when she started with the idea, and then 2015 we really started to launch big things.
And has she and both of you still been writing an article every single day with Ever Winding Circles?
No. So that was the initial thing. Like, her story of how she got to here. She's actually a dentist by trade. And she had just been seeing for 10 years, and she's a writer too. And she had been seeing for, a decade. Back in 2014, just her patients come in and have this like downward spiral. They could not say a single nice thing about the world, right? They'd start off, Mary Ellen, how are you doing? Mary Ellen used to be a very positive person. Now she can't get herself out of this downward spiral. She just feels so negative. She's seen this on the TV, and what about that? And so she was seeing her patients become more and more influenced by the media. And she's always been one, she and my father are both dentists. They practice together, and they've been really important to them, is keeping humanity in healthcare, listening to their patients, being a part of their patients' lives. I think, what other medical person do you have in your life that you see twice a year, right? And you can have a close relationship with your patients in that world. And so one day my mom got an email from a young guy that she'd known since he was like a toddler. He'd come in forever, and he had joined the army and was stationed abroad and was in the middle of a war zone and just not seeing goodness in the world. And so he emailed, of all people, his dentist and was like, Dr. Linda, you're a very positive person. Please let me know if there's something good out there in the world, because I can't see it from where I am. And at the time, she went online, and this was 2014. Maybe it was late 2013. And, she scoured the internet, but she couldn't find any place that didn't have some super left or right leaning political stance. Everything was and is very politicized. And she said, I don't know what this kid's political, politics are. I can't send him that. Or it was so interested in monetization that you had to like swim through pop-ups to even get to the content. And so my mom, being my mom, she's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just make this my own website. So she started writing an article every day on any subject under the sun that proved it was still an amazing world. And that was great. And we were creating cool content. But I think after a while, what we realized was we didn't want to be more noise in the media sphere, right? And so we were putting out content. It was good content, but it wasn't the kind of content that we're producing now, which is like, put some meat on your bones, makes you feel like when you go away, like, all right, I can do stuff. So now our publishing schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because we don't want to be adding more noise to the media sphere. We want to say, like, here's 3 things that you need to have this week to get you through and to help you understand the world is a good place. And so that's what we're really conscious of. So we've backed off of the writing every day, which was chaotic. Any content producer knows producing that much content is a lot. And now we're really focusing on how to create great content that serves people the best. And it happens that happens on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, not an everyday schedule.
And even 3 days a week, that's a lot of amazing things that are happening. And it requires a lot of looking for the good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy to find that, but once you look for it, you find more. Something I talk about all the time is if you want to feel better, if you want to have more energy, feel more optimistic, feel more uplifted, there's 2 things that go into it: how you use your body, how you move your body, and also what you focus on, right? What you see, what you think about, your internal dialogue, what you notice around you in your environment, because you could focus on the dirt on the window, or you could focus on the beautiful sunset behind the window, right? Both are in view, but you choose which one to focus on. And a big thing is, if you want to make the transition to seeing more good, you have to become conscious and look for more good. So what would you recommend to people who want to find more good? Like, how can someone do that?
Yeah. So we have this thing that we call the 4 shifts, and we use this to help people frame up not only how to change the algorithms that they're seeing, because let's face it, a lot of the content that we're getting right now in our world comes to us through algorithms. Algorithms are not a bad, scary thing. Our brain uses its own set of algorithms, and I'll get into that in a second, how we change our brain algorithms and our online algorithms. But basically they were here to serve us, right? What they were doing was what we clicked on, we got more of. And that was good, because we didn't really want to see that guy's posts that we hadn't talked to in many, many years, but he was still our friend on Facebook. We prefer to see our friend stuff. So that was the intention of algorithms when they started out, right? But now what they're doing, because there's so much outside post content coming onto our social media feeds, is now what we're doing is we're just sort of creating our own echo chambers with our algorithms. And we can change that. And it's become kind of negative, because we're human. We react to things that give us a big emotional response. And those tend to be awe, fear, and anger, right? So only one of those is a positive emotion. Fear and anger, we're probably going to get more of on our Facebook feeds. And certainly in the past few years we were.
Yeah.
So we have these 4 shifts that we tell people to do. And this will change not only your computer algorithms, but I would say, I'm going to call it your brain algorithms at the same time. So the first thing that we tell people to do is pause. Pause before you click on anything. Pause before you are about to blurt out whatever it is, or pause before you're about to let a negative emotion and thought take you on a journey. Pause. Ask, because every click we make, everything we choose to put our attention on is a vote. It either trains our brain that that's what we want to focus on, like you were saying, or it trains our algorithms online to give us more of that thing. So your click is a vote always. And also your click is a vote for the people in your life, or the content that you're clicking on, right? If we tell content creators, give us more fear, give us more anger, that's getting my click. We're in an attention economy right now, right? Whatever is loudest, whatever is most like it makes you have the most emotion, you're going to click on it, and content creators are going to give you more of that. Same thing with your family. If they find that they can get a big emotional reaction out of you because they, or your attention because they give you a big emotional reaction, or your partner or your friends or the crazy person on the street, whatever it is, if you pause before you give your attention to anything, you'll be saying, all right, I am in control here. I am in the driver's seat, and I don't have to see or feel as much of that as I am. So number 1 is pause. Number 2 is ignore more. We can all do this. We can ignore the things that are causing us to feel fear, dread, want us to have an emotional outburst. Online, this looks like it's a little more simple. Don't scroll aimlessly and click on anything, right? Don't click out of fear or anger. We call it the ABCs. Don't click out of anger. Don't click out of boredom, and don't click out of morbid curiosity. You know what I mean? Like, we all see that like crazy image, or like, this is what this celebrity looks like now. Don't click on that, because what you're doing is you're saying the internet wants more of this. And here's the thing: when you're clicking, say, when you're ignoring more, does the world need more of this, right? Maybe you're really interested in this piece that was had a lot of acrimony in it, that was really negative. Maybe you are like, oh, this will make me more of an intellectual. Ask yourself, does the world need more of this, right? If a video is going viral that hurts people to watch and can trigger other people to watch, ask yourself, do I need to hit the share button on this? Do I need to push this to the top? Can I talk about it in a different way? Be more conscious, ignore more, and you will find that you will start to see things go away. You will start to see negativity kind of, even in your life. If you're ignoring more of the things that make your blood boil, you will start to give room and space for the things that are beauty and goodness, right? Yeah. A great example in personal life is I had a friend of mine, she was going to the grocery store at the beginning of the pandemic, and she came back and she was furious. And we were like, what's wrong? And she was like, well, this person had their mask down their nose, and, they didn't have wipes. And, the person who was checking me out was very rude, and everybody was walking down the aisles the wrong way, and yada, yada, yada. And we're like, whoa, okay. Next time you go, just solely in tizzy. We said, okay, next time you go, try this. Don't count the number of bad things that are happening. Count the number of good things, that they had Purell by the door. How many people like tried to smile with their eyes when they like tried to scoot by you in the produce section. How kind the person was who helped you. How people did keep their distance from you and were kind in those ways, right? And that changes your perspective, because now you're training your brain to look for good instead of bad. So when you're ignoring more, you're training your brain to look for more good instead of bad. Yeah. So then that comes to the third thing that we say, which is seek signs of goodness and progress. Right now, they are not going to come to you. You have trained your brain algorithms, and you have trained your fingers, your habits, what TV programs you go listen to, what YouTube people you go listen to, and you've trained your algorithms to be negative. So you can't expect these things to just come at you, right? You need to do some active participation in this. In person, maybe you are the person that constantly was having the negative spiral conversation. So whenever anybody in your life wants to have that downward spiral conversation, the weather is bad, the politics are bad, everything is bad, they're used to coming to you for that. So it has to be on you to seek signs of goodness and progress. Go out, find things that are good. When someone is talking to you and they're in that downward spiral, change up the narrative. Be like, hey, actually, did you hear about that fundraiser downtown that's happening? Did you hear they got $100,000 for breast cancer research, right? You can have an active part in that. You can talk about what's going on, what's good in the world. And when we're looking at our online lives, because let's face it, our online lives are changing our mood in our real lives. Yeah. You can unfollow people on Instagram. You can unfollow people, you can keep them as your friends, but unfollow them on Facebook. Not doing it arbitrarily just because they don't agree with you, but if they're constantly spitting out vitriol and it's not what's good for you, you can unfollow them. And if you go and follow new people, you follow people that make your heart sing. You follow media that makes your heart sing. You follow content creators on Instagram that you're like, yes, now I want to go mountain bike everything, right? That are making your heart sing. Guess what? The algorithm will start to give you more and more of those similar kinds of things. And now you're in a whole different world that you can investigate. So you can, again, train your algorithms, if you're seeking signs of goodness and progress, to send you more. And same thing happens when we talk about like people in our world. The more that you are bringing people into your life that are uplifting you and uplifting, the more they will bring those people into your life, and your bubble continues. So that's number three, that is seek signs of goodness and progress. Seek signs of goodness and progress. Seek people that bring goodness and progress into your life. And then lastly is share signs of goodness and progress, because none of this will change. None of this will change if those of us who are actively committed to pausing, ignoring more, seeking signs of goodness and progress, if we don't share that, then Topher White is just putting old cell phones in trees and hoping that somebody gives him money. The kid that has the great fundraiser for breast cancer every year in town is just knocking on doors. You and I, who are trying to change our mental state and how we look through the world, are just feeling like we're alone if we're not sharing what we're doing, sharing signs of goodness and progress. And a share online is worth way more than a like and a comment or a click. If you are sharing it, you are saying, I have made this a part of my self map, who I am, and I'm putting it online, right? Or I am putting it out there to my best friend to tell them about this great company that I love, or whatever it is. So really, when you look at those four shifts, you are pausing, you are ignoring more, you are seeking signs of goodness and progress, and you are sharing those things. And that will become habit. Start with one and then keep going. And you will see not only does your online life change, which makes you feel better in real life, but you will also see your real life change. And you will start to see that you will start noticing beauty instead of anger. Truth will become something that lies in beauty. And you will start to see that the world around you is at least 50-50 good, at the very least, if not more, and really start to be able to walk through the world with a sense of possibility instead of a sense of future fatalism.
That is so fascinating. And there's just so much that was just covered there. I love the concept of training your brain algorithm and also training the computer algorithm, because I'm guilty of the computer algorithm. Let me tell you, I'm very conscious of the conversations I have and avoiding, like, I used to be somebody who would be sucked into the gossip. I used to be somebody who would join in. The only things I knew how to talk to people about were about other people. It's just who I was 7-8 years ago. And I had to completely change the way that I thought, the way that I processed information. And I've been able to do so, and I'm getting better every day. And the one thing I'm guilty of is I'll be scrolling through my Facebook or my Snapchat. Snapchat's like the number one thing because of that discovery feed now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll see, oh, Kim Kardashian's got a new boyfriend. And I'll click it and I'll hit the read and I'll scroll through it. And then I see more of that. And my wife, Bree, is a huge Kardashian fan. And she's like, how do you even know these things? Like, I'm a bigger fan than you are. And I'm like, well, Snapchat showed me. And she's like, you're crazy. Stop clicking on that stuff. So I can definitely get better at that. And just imagine a world where even a 10% difference in the population decides to follow the pause, ignore, seek, and share process. Just imagine what would
there's
be
actual numbers. So the World Economic Forum, I should have said this, I thought about it and then I forgot to say it. So the World Economic Forum did a study. You only need 25% of people to make a behavior change to create sweeping cultural change. Wow. That's all you need, 25%. So if 25% of people just said, I'm going to step up to the plate and I'm going to do the seek, pause, ignore, the other way around. Pause, ignore, seek, share. I got too excited on that point. Pause, ignore, seek, share. If 25% of people chose to do that with the way that they scroll online, if we can get to 25% of people, we will change the way content creators create content. We will change the way we're talking to each other. And there will be an upward spiral ripple effect towards other people changing their behavior as well. So we only need 25. That's all, guys. We just need 25.
That's so optimistic. That's incredible. And I think based on what you've told me, we're already seeing forward progress. And with what you're doing, with what all of us, together are doing to get this message out there, I can only imagine what it will be like in the next 10 years.
Right. And I think we've reached a really important tipping point where people are finally taking ownership of how they're feeling. We now understand through, documentaries like what was it, The Social Dilemma, that of what's going on. But what that documentary didn't tell us is like, give us those 4 shifts. Like, what can I actually do? Like, now I know how algorithm exists, but what do I do? And I think we're at a reckoning point generally with us where the internet came in with great intentions, but it grew really fast and it's a toddler running with scissors. Like, think about it. I mean, I'm 20, I guess I'm 28 now. I'm 28 and I grew up with like dial-up internet in Vermont, and we were making the rules of how to AIM. Like, I remember you used to just be able to be like a young teenager and like get into whatever like weird like chat roulette group things that you wanted to get into, and there's no rules, and there was no adults telling us what the rules were. And so like the rules of the road for how the internet works were kind of made by children and like 22-year-olds. So like, we don't make any rules. We don't let the president be that young. And yet the tool that we're using to connect, the tool that we're using that's supposed to better society, the rules that we chose for that, the rules that came about were chosen and created by people whose prefrontal cortexes weren't even like developed yet. We don't let those people even have good car insurance, right? So, but we're on the crash train to like let them be in charge of the rules. So it's now at a time where we can be conscious, where we can say, all right, that was a bad idea. Now, how do we change our behavior, and how do we create new rules and norms and new manners? Like, just like we have manners for how we walk in a restaurant or a store or walk
Yeah.
down the street, how do we create actual societal manners for how we all behave and what we do on the internet? And that's not to police anybody. That's not to say that we should or should not do anything. It's just, you generally don't let teenagers make the rules for large societal sweeping important changes. That's just generally what we do. They have great ideas. Climate action right now with kids, important. But we generally don't let them make the rules. And yet that's what we're using as our tool to connect everyone in the world. So it's just time for a little bit of a reevaluation and a recentering, I think.
And I've talked, and speaking of kids specifically, because I feel like the most good we can do is by training our young to adopt these principles early on. And I've heard you and your mom both talk about like even teaching your kids to question things, like why is the TV on all the time? Why? And before they click on something or watch something, watch and see what the person's doing with their body to tell if they're giving their opinion or they're just giving actual facts. And I thought that was so interesting because kids just, they're not taught to question things. I wasn't taught to question things. And my question for you is, how important is it to train in a sense our children to think in this manner, and how important is that? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's vital. I think it is so important. And I'll tell you this, like, I was trained on how the Dewey Decimal System worked, even though we were in an internet era. And I think, and it's no one's fault, but librarians who barely used the internet when I was young were put in charge of training us on how to use the internet and what the rules were. And no one knew. And so now I think that internet literacy, online literacy, is one of the most important things that we can give children in this entire world. A lot of people are actually, so my mom, Dr. Linda, wrote a book called Happiness is an Option that goes through those 4 shifts, that talks about the conspiracy of goodness, that talks about all this. And we've had several people say, I sat down with my young teenager and we read this together and we talked about, this is how we set our internet rules together. This is how we set our screen time rules together. And I think that's really important because the internet is a tool. It's a tool like a hammer. It is a tool like a screwdriver. And it can be used to do incredible things like build a house, or it can be used to do horrible things like injure other people. And so if we are not teaching young people, if we're not teaching us, let's just face it, a lot of the vitriol that's happening on things like Facebook and social media are not coming from young people, right? It's coming from older people. Everyone needs to learn internet literacy, right? It's kind of, we can't, when I look at my Facebook groups of who's starting the fights, which, I mean, I've seen fights in the comments about whether or not to microwave a butternut squash, a spaghetti squash. The F word got used. This is why we do not have comments on Ever Widening Circles until the world can like have a conversation about spaghetti squash that doesn't call the other person a bleeping idiot. We don't get comments. But this is the kind of thing, it is so vital for us to understand as adults how we're teaching young people. And it is so vital for them to be able, we give them the space to question what's going on, because kids are seeing stuff younger and younger on the internet. And if we are not giving them a space to question what they're seeing on the internet will teach them, right? And we know that is not the best way of teaching young people. And so it is imperative that what we do to teach online literacy, not only as adults and educators, we need to educate ourselves on what's best, but we also then need to pass that on to young people. And it's just imperative. It's just, I can't think of anything else. You know, I have a passion for education, and it is one of the most important things I found, because kids want to listen, and they want, I don't want to say they want rules, but they want at least guidelines on what to do, because otherwise that they're in charge of choosing them themselves. And if there's nobody there to be a guiding hand, the internet will teach them, the algorithms will teach them. And we know that that's not the best thing for people whose brains are developing.
Yes. If we don't teach them, other people will. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's not to be fearful. That's not to be like, oh, don't let your kids on the internet. Oh, whatever. That's not that at all. There are so many great, incredible spaces where kids can learn on the internet. The biggest thing though is just teaching kids to, just like you look both ways before crossing the street, look both ways before you click on something. There are basic rules that we have on the outside world that we need to apply to the online world as well. Questioning would be, I would say, one of the biggest things. Question the intentions before I click. Let's question the intentions. If there's one thing I would teach a kid of mine or a student that I'm working with. It'd be question the intention of what's going on with that person's post or that person's or this media company's, headline.
Yes. And I want to talk about questions. I want to talk about questions, your journey as an entrepreneur. And then I also want to talk about the Conspiracy of Goodness Network.
Yeah.
So I had to ask you about your mantra because you talk about the most important questions of our time, universal questions. And your mantra is it novel? Is it useful? And how does it help? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So my background is in design. I studied design at Harvard. And is it novel, when I was going through the design world, was like the question, right? Like I once had a professor ask me if we needed horizontal floors. Sure, that would be very novel, but is it useful, right? So as I was going through design school and my design processes, what I really found was that this is it useful part really wasn't coming in. We weren't listening to the tradespeople who knew how the HVAC system should go in. We weren't listening to the craftsmen who have had ages and ages and know that you can't turn wood that way, but just because I want to cantilever it because I'm a designer, ooh, let's do it, right? So for me, this is it novel, is it useful thing is a really important thing because, yeah, I can come up with the best next Uber, but is it actually useful to people? Is it going to help, right? So I used to be, my mantra was, is it novel, is it useful, when I was a designer. And now as I'm understanding my work to be more globally relevant and have a wider impact on people, that last part, is it useful? How does it help the world, is really important because that makes me think about somebody other than myself as I'm designing, as I'm doing my work. And that's not to say that we do things in a way that doesn't feel genuine to us, but the more that we can do things, the more that we can choose to click on stuff, the more that we can choose to create things that are saying, okay, is it novel, is it useful, is it helping the world? I think the more that we create stuff that is more equitable, the more that we create stuff that is useful around the world, and the more we can, as a society, sort of think about the future as we plan and do today.
That is so interesting. You're a very philosophical thinker. I love this conversation. Very cool. I love those questions. I love the whole idea of asking questions. I've always been a curious person, and I grew up in sales, and the best salespeople, they ask the best questions. The outcome of your sales comes down to the quality of your questions. And the more curious you are, the better you'll do. And I found that a lot of people are afraid to ask questions, whether it's from an authority figure or whatever it might be. But we have to ask these things.
And a lot of people don't know how to ask questions. Again, I work in education a lot, and we are not, to ask a question for a lot of young people is to prove that you are dumb. So I had a very interesting conversation with an older woman, and she was talking with her grandkids, and she's one of those philosophical older women who, like, you just want to go sit in their like living room and just like hear all their words. And she said, I asked my grandkids the other day at dinner, how many of you raise your hand to ask a question in class? And and our grandkids were like, Grandma, why would we do that? That would just prove we didn't know the material. And she goes, what? Like, her understanding what a question was, to be curious, to poke holes in things, to say, I don't understand, tell me more. Or I have so many questions, I totally understand, now I want to know more. But to her grandkids, asking a question was a sign of weakness. And so what I think we have done a lot for young people, education, both formal and informal, what we're learning at home, what we're learning in school, is not based out of questions being a source of curiosity. Right. And I think curiosity is the most important tool we can do to bridge divides of any kind. We are not teaching people to be curious about one another and about what's around us, to question why we do the things we do. And instead, we're saying to ask a question is a sign of weakness. And I will tell you, I fell entirely, until I heard her say that, I fell into the camp of, I don't think I raised my hand once to ask a question, unless it was to maybe stroke my own ego at Harvard, right? You didn't ask a question that said, I don't understand.
Wow.
Because it was a folly of yourself and not a folly of the educator or the material.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to change what a question means, or what it means to ask a question in our society, if we want to move forward and teach people to be curious. And it's taken me a really long time. There's a reason why Linda, my mom, does the interviews for our Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, and I don't. It's because I am frankly not the best question proposer. It's really hard for me to come up with questions. And because that is a thing that I have been very badly trained at, and it's something that I'm working really hard to get better at. But yeah, I think when it comes to how do we generate curiosity and how do we teach people to ask the right questions, I don't think we're teaching young people how to do that very well. And again, that's not the folly of anybody. I think it's just the folly of sort of where we've come in a knowledge-based society.
And while you might not be the best at curating questions, your strength, it seems, is in really going deep into a topic and diving in and
Yes.
giving new insights and new ways of thinking.
Right, right. And that's the curiosity piece, right? So I might not be great at interviewing you, Brandon, but I am good at sort of interrogating, I guess, a subject, right? And I think that's what makes our content in Ever Widening Circles so awesome, is like we don't write an article. The author does not write an article because it's something, if it's something that doesn't interest them, because we want to convey in our article that sense of curiosity. If I'm writing about saving hyacinth macaws. They're the largest parrot in the world that can fly. I have to be very interested in that. Like, if I am engaged in the subject matter that I'm writing about, my curiosity and my enthrallment with it will come across to you as a writer. And so that's really important to us, that's one of our values as a company, is to work with joy and work with curiosity. Because those are the two things that are going to bring out great content and, frankly, help educate other people as well to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have such an interesting story. And the last 10 years for you have just been, you've done a lot in the last 10 years. You're young, so I can only imagine what the next 10 years will look like. And I want to talk with you about two things: entrepreneurship and the Conspiracy of Goodness Network. But I want to start with, first, you decided to go into the traditional education system, and you went all the way to the top. You went to Harvard. I've never actually talked to someone who went to Harvard, so very cool. So this is the first for me. Very, very awesome. You see it in movies and all that stuff. But you went through that, and you talked in the past about you knew you wanted to do work with a startup of some sort. And you said, well, your mom's already doing this, so you felt like, well, what better startup is there than this? So what was, like, did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, and what was that transition like for you?
I think I was really, quite frankly, afraid of the word entrepreneur. I hated the word entrepreneur until for a while, I was working on my MBA and teaching students, undergraduates at Clarkson University up in upstate New York, or working with undergraduates, and working on building them a design space there. But and they were like, entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business, you're an entrepreneur. And I was like, please stop using that word to describe me. I don't really like it. But I guess that's what I am. If it comes down to it, is I am an entrepreneur. And I think when it comes to why I want to do a startups were an interesting space. When I left Harvard, people either going to, med school, going to do consulting, maybe law school, a lot of them waited a year, or finance. And I was like, none of those things. I'm squeamish around blood. Numbers are real hard for me to do on the spot, and consulting, the process of trying to get into that was just so time consuming. I was like, I would rather go find a startup that's doing something creative and interesting. And so it was more like that creative spirit. I think one of the things to me that I love about entrepreneurship, and that I loved about the startup spirit, because I'd interned with and worked a little bit at Harvard's iLab, or with Harvard's iLab, I should say, was that there just seemed to be this boundless creativity that I really enjoyed in entrepreneurship and startup spaces, right? That we could tackle any problem if we just asked the right question of it. That we could, for instance, the group that I worked with said, okay, there's all these people who are incredible artists that are actually homeless, and they may have a physical disability, or they may have some kind of cognitive disability, but they're creating beautiful art. Why don't we create a marketplace that sells these people's art and that gives them a way of having income by being artists? And that was my sort of first view of like, oh my God, we can do business for good together. And we can be boundlessly creative in how we solve problems. Again, that novel, useful, doesn't help the world thing. And so that's how I got into this idea of startups and entrepreneurship. Was really, I saw this beeline in my own house for, is it novel, is it useful, does it help the world? And really, I think where we are now, 7 years later, how many, 7 years later, 6 years later. So how long have I ever been out of college? 6 years later, we've really manifested what I had as a vision when I sat up on my deck that day, on my parents' deck that day. Was really like, I wanted something that was bigger, where we were creating community, where we were creating our own content, where we were reaching lots of people globally. That's what I saw the potential of. And I think we're reaching it. We're really reaching it very well, as an organization. And I think it is novel that we are doing media that matters. It is so useful. People need to know that there's positivity out there. And does it help the world? And maybe this is my selfish argument, I think it does. I think we're helping people live in a digital era in a new way, and see the world in brighter terms so they can take that on to their children, their families, their communities.
Definitely. And I completely agree that in today's world, you can really take any situation, and if you ask the right questions, you can find a solution. You can really help people. And I think entrepreneurs are the ones who change the world out of anybody. You look at Elon Musk, and you look at all these individuals who are just making waves, like even Sarah Blakely. She's a billionaire entrepreneur. She didn't intend to do it for the income. She intended to solve a problem. And she was able to do that. And within 10 years, she had $1 billion company, even sooner than that. And I guess, what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome or are still working through? Like, what did you encounter that you had to overcome?
I think one of the biggest things we've had to overcome as an organization, and this ties into the Conspiracy of Goodness Network as well, is that when you're doing good things, people love to tell you that you're looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. They love to tell you, "Oh, sweetie, that's so nice. Thank you so much for coming." They love to tell you that you're either being too passive, being too aggressive, or too passive aggressive. I've had all those emails. They are telling you that it's a good idea, but I don't really think it fits in. You get a lot of people that are, for lack of a better, very patronizing to the idea. And a lot of people in the media who are very patronizing to the idea, because we are pushing against a narrative and a type of mediascape. And so it's been really hard as a media company to get other media to talk about us and to get the word out, because we're changing up what's happening. We're saying, no, we can have media that matters. We can have media that's solutions based. We don't have to dwell in the negativity, and we need to celebrate the progress that's happening in the world. And so for us, the biggest thing has been finding organizations, whether it's a web developer, whether it's a marketing firm, whether it's a PR firm, whether it's whatever, that doesn't look at us and either say, "Oh, well, that's nice, thank you for coming," or, sort of take advantage of your goodwill. And there's really nobody else in the space that's doing what we're doing. So it's really this aloneness that we felt throughout this, that who do we turn to next? I mean, we're not experts in the media field. And as you know, from many, many entrepreneur stories, the people that are most successful are the outsiders. But that's a hard road to hoe. It is not easy for sure. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles that we've had, is finding co-conspirators, to use our own terminology, in goodness, that want to work with us and work with us in a way that's honest and genuine, and is not that understands our mission.
And we had a question that actually talked about that. One of the questions is, how do you control your reaction to what other people say to you? Like when you're being patronized and they're like, "Oh, it's nice what you're doing, but that's not going to sell. You should do it this way. That's not going to work." Like, how do you move through that criticism, or even sometimes that hate, in a sense?
Yeah, that is a hard one, because I am a people pleaser, and frankly, I like to be right a lot, and I think I'm very right. And usually I can talk people into at least pretending to agree with me, and that's very exhausting. And I don't suggest anybody who's an entrepreneur that listens to this or watches this does that, because I got the best piece of advice literally 2 weeks ago. So we've had 8 years of me trying to stand on my head and spit nickels and convince people that we're doing a good job and getting angry when they don't. And she goes, "It's not for everybody, and that's fine." She goes, why would you spend your time if you were at a conference and you only had an hour to network with people, and you knew that out there in the world, 50% of the people in the room, or in our case, let's say 25, we'll go to our 25% of the people in the room will agree with you. They will want to help you. They will be on board. Why would you, if you bumped into the first person or the second person and they were naysayers, why would you spend 10 minutes trying to convince them of something if you only had an hour?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just say, "Well, I guess this isn't," give them your pitch. And if they were like, "Well, actually, media," which I've heard, frustrating. Why wouldn't I just be like, "Thank you so much, Jack. Have a great one." And then walk to the next person and say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing." And they fall in love with what I'm doing, and they collect the other 5 people for me in the room that are going to love our mission. Right. So that's how I look at anything. And that's my biggest new, maybe that's one of the soapboxes that I'm on right now, because it's novel and interesting to me, is this idea that if If you give people your pitch, if you give people the pitch that you know works with the people that love you, and they say, well, have you thought of it this way? Well, just be like, it's not for them. And it's not going to be for everyone. And if you just don't spend your time on the people for whom it is not for them, you get to move on and find the people who it is for, and they will become your evangelist if you find enough of them. So that is my biggest thing. It is the lesson that I'm trying to learn now. And the thing that I am currently most working on with my own spiel is that I can go pitch this to 1,000 VCs and they're probably not going to like it. Is VC funding for me? Probably not. Right.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. So that's what I'm learning right now. And that's what I would highly suggest to anybody listening or watching. If you give them the pitch, it's not for them.
I respect you highly for not continuing to just try to find more rooms in different rooms. You took it and you created your own space. And I looked at the Conspiracy of Goodness Network. I combed through it because it's an awesome community. Like, everything you're doing there is incredible. And without giving too much away, I want to hear it from you. Like, this is a newer project for you. Tell me about the Conspiracy of Goodness Network and what you're looking to achieve there.
Yeah. Firstly, when we say conspiracy of goodness, that is my easiest way of telling whether or not I need to keep talking to somebody. Because the conspiracy of goodness, we landed on it a couple years ago. My mom was talking to somebody and the guy was like, Linda, what you're doing is in the conspiracy of goodness. And for anybody who's a part of the conspiracy of goodness, you kind of are like, it's like suddenly the world, you pop into a new world. You're like, wait, what do you mean? And so she was like, wait, what do you mean? And he told this story and she went to go on to research it. So conspiracy of goodness, the word, I'm going to just tell you real quick because I think it's a great story. During World War II, there's a little town called Le Chambon, France. And during the period in which people were being, murdered in camps, this town hid thousands and thousands and thousands of Jewish refugees. And they did this not in any organized fashion. It's just people opened up their homes and let people stay in their barns, their attics, their basements. They just hid people. This town. And when France was liberated, just children came pouring out of attics and barns and basements. All these people that had been rescued in a quiet conspiracy were all together and they were alive. And there was no formal organization in this town. So there was a rabbi named Rabbi Harold Schulweis who was giving a lecture on the conspiracy of evil that was World War II. And at the end of his lecture, a gentleman stood up and said, Rabbi, why don't we talk about the conspiracy of goodness that was happening during World War II? And he was like, okay, tell me more. And he goes, I was a Dutch rescuer. Do you think I could have saved people in my basement or my attic without the help of the milkman, the mailman, and the neighbors? They all probably knew that something was happening, but they chose not to change it. For every one person rescued, there were 7 rescuers. Wow. Right? So that, to me, that is an important story because what it tells us is that there's a quiet wave of goodness and progress going out and throughout the world. We've talked about it here now, up until now, but we're not celebrating it. And the people that are a part of it feel like they're just little pinpoints of light in a world that keeps telling them the future is bad. Don't keep trying. I love this word conspiracy too. This one I think is really important. The word conspiracy comes from 2 words, con, which means with, and spirare, which means to breathe. So to be in a conspiracy with other people is to breathe together. Wow. Right? And we are breathing life by turning that phrase on its head. We can reclaim any phrase if we want to. And by reclaiming that phrase, what we are saying is there is a group of people who are quietly breathing goodness into the world. They are saying that we don't have to deal with this negativity. We can change the narrative. And by giving them a space with the Conspiracy of Goodness Network, even just the Conspiracy of Goodness movement, it started as a movement and now it's a network because what we found was people needed community. They needed what we needed. They needed somebody who didn't say, oh, that's a dumb idea. That's how we kill good ideas, is by people saying that's a dumb idea. Think of all of the good ideas in this world that are getting lost because people don't have the funding, the networking capacity, the family dollars, the connections to make their idea become a reality. And imagine, especially in communities that need it, if all of those people had a place that they could come to grow personally and professionally to make more good in the world. That's what we need. We need more than ever is a space where all of those people can come together. And when we looked around, there was nothing. And we didn't want to put it on Facebook. We wanted to create a space that was closed. I mean, we say closed off, but closed off from people that were naysayers and negative. So it is like a membership community, but that was very intentional because we wanted to put the social back in social media. And we know that by just making a tiny hurdle to entry, just, saying like, please put in your actual human contact information and please be a real person. And here are the basic rules. And this is how we're all living by them, putting some rules, some manners on our space, that we can create a very positive space where people aren't just saying, here are my 30,000 accolades. They actually feel welcomed enough to say, hey, I don't understand, or I need, or I want to learn. And that's really vital. And I'll say one more thing about the Conspiracy of Goodness Network that is really important, because I don't want people who are on this and not leading their own companies to believe that they are not a part of the Conspiracy of Goodness Network and the movement. The Conspiracy of Goodness and goodness itself is an ecosystem, and it needs 3 different kinds of people in order to survive. It needs the doers, needs the Topher Whites up in the trees, saving the rainforest. It needs the helpers, the people that are at home sending in their cell phones to Topher, the people that are fundraising for him on the ground. These people, they're the ones in your community that do the March of Dimes every year and the Relay for Life and the whatever. No one's paying them. They just want to help. And then there's the learners. The learners are the people who are the second climbers. Or the next climbers. They're the ones that have done the corporate job 9 to 5, and now they're like, I want to do good in the world. Or the young people. Imagine how many young people that just graduated. We said, go do good in the world.
Yeah.
Bye. That's it. We didn't give them any space. So we need the learners, the helpers, and the doers to create this ecosystem of goodness, to create that 25% of people that are a part of this conspiracy of goodness that can move things forward. And I think that most of us are somehow a part of that ecosystem. And we all need each other in order to thrive and survive and keep the conspiracy of goodness going. And it's not like it's going to go away, but I think we certainly can be louder than all the other conspiracies out there if we are together in this and we are breathing goodness into the world together.
Wow. What a beautiful platform. I'm joining.
Good. Join us.
Clear. Guys, really, if you go to the link, go to the description, there's going to be a link to the Conspiracy of Goodness Network. Check out the website, check out the about, all the stuff, sign up for it. It's exactly what you just said. It's for the doers, it's for the helpers, and it's for the people who are next.
Mm-hmm.
And my one of my final questions, I have a very quick question at the end, but this question here is the average person right now who is working that 9 to 5, like you were talking about, who has a family, who has all these other obligations, but they still want to make a difference of some sort. What would you recommend to somebody who they're so busy, but they still want to make a difference? They're the helpers, right? Like, what can they do?
That is a really good question. And I think one of the things that any one of us can do is just educate ourselves. Before you go throwing your dollar somewhere, before you go having a really strong opinion on one stance or other, just start with educating yourself a little bit more on the topic. We can do this with audiobooks. We can find a podcast that makes sense to us. We can educate ourselves and question who's educating us. Don't just choose one kind of guru to go through and educate yourself with. The platform that I live and die on is no one person is going to have all the answers. You have to listen to a lot of different thoughts and opinions in order to come up with your own, but educate yourself first, right? Because then you can know where you fit within this world. One of the best things, and I really should remember her name, there is this thing called the Network of Social Change, or not the network, it's the maybe it's called the Ecosystem of Social Change. Basically, there are 12 different ways that people can be a part of social change. And there are people who are the weavers. Those are the ones that are maybe helping weave narratives together. There are the educators, the ones that are helping educate other people. There are the first responders. They're the ones that are marching in the streets and making legislation. There's all these different kinds of people. And you don't have to be, I think very often we think we have to be the first responder. And we feel maybe quite guilty if we aren't the first responder, but maybe that's not our role in this network of social change. Maybe there's other things, and I wish that I had the person's name and we could look it up. If you look up Network of Social Change or Ecosystem of Social Change, you'll be able to find sort of these, I think it's 12 different roles that they see happen and are vital to making social and community change. Find out where you are in that. And if right now you can't be the first responder because you have kids and a family and a 9 to 5 and you're doing a side hustle and 15 other things, maybe you can find some other place to be in that ecosystem. But I think there is a space for everybody. And it's just finding out the space that resonates with you and the space that fits into what you can do, because it's not about progress. It's not about perfection. It's about progress, right?
Yeah.
So if you can make, like you said, the top 1% changes to do better or be kinder, you're already starting to work in the conspiracy of goodness. And you're already started. And that's really the first step.
Thanks for going into that. I think that's an excellent way of saying that there's something that all of us can do in order to really make a difference and really shift the narrative by that 25% that we need. And my final question for you, and I mean, the whole conversation's kind of been about it, but I'm curious to see how you'll wrap it up into like a sentence or two. What is the change or the positive impact that you want to see in the world?
I think that I want to see people move from a space of future fatalism to a space of to understanding the future in terms of possibility. I think right now we have a narrative that the climate is unchangeable, that the world is terrible, that there's not a future possible. And there's a great thought leader. She has a TED Talk about fierce optimism. And what we need is fierce. We need fierce optimism. We will never change the world if we don't have fierce optimism. We can't create solutions that change a future if we don't believe the future is going to exist or be good. So we have to believe that the world is going to be better if we want to create solutions that make the world better. And so that is my biggest hope in all of the work that I do, that we are able to change people from having a sense of future fatalism to fierce optimism, because we need fierce optimism to make any kind of change, to raise kids that are good, to make changes in our businesses, to steer the ship in a new direction, which is frankly what we need to do in order to have a future and a bright future for every person on this planet.
That is incredible. I absolutely love that. Liesl, what an enlightening conversation and an uplifting conversation. Like, I feel amazing right now. Like, I don't know about you, but like the vibes are like next level over here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
I look forward to see what you do, and I look forward to having you back on the show and
all right,
because I know you're going to keep working on incredible things, and I look forward to see what the Conspiracy of Goodness Network becomes.
All right. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you having me on and being able to connect with your community. I think this is really vital that all of us co-conspirators in goodness and meaningful media are talking to one another and sharing our work with each other's communities.
I agree. Thank you so much, Liesl.
Thank you.
What a conversation. That just uplifting, enlightening. It was a conversation of possibility, a conversation of knowing that there's some way that we can give back no matter our situation, whether we're an entrepreneur, working the 9 to 5, busy with family. There's so many things that we can do to make a difference. And it begins with us. It begins with educating ourselves. It begins with the formula that Liesl gave us of pause, ignore, and the other two things that she mentioned. Just absolutely incredible. And I'm just happy we had her on. And in the description, I'm going to have a link to the Conspiracy of Goodness Network, so you guys can go check it out and sign up. It's a small investment to sign up, but you're going to be around so many other people who are doing incredible things. And it's just one more step towards really shifting the narrative by that 25%. Like I always mention at the end, the number one way that you can support this broadcast, only if it gave you value, only if you found something incredible in this conversation, engage with it, like it, leave a comment. And the number one way that you can support the Be a Better broadcast is by sharing this with one friend, one person who could use this message, one doer, one helper, one person who's next in line. Share it with one person who needs to hear this message. And we come at you every Monday and Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.